So welcome everybody, welcome to this webinar, which is really a celebration of what has emerged in the Active Hope Foundation's training. And back in the end of March, we had a soft launch webinar. And since then, the training has been emerging through us. Chris has been doing amazing work creating the videos, and I've been alongside him in that and working on the guided practice sheets. And so this evening, we really wanted to come together with the wider network and celebrate it. And so that's one of the purposes of this webinar. But we will also be doing some active hope practice together tonight. And we'd really like to give you a deeper introduction to the course, to give you a sense of some of the gems that it contains, and also some of the ways that you can interact with it. So that's our hopes for this evening. What I'd love to do before we go any further is just to invite us all to take this moment as an opportunity to really arrive with each other in this connection right here and now. So maybe just feeling the points of contact, your feet on the floor, or any points of contact with what you're sitting on. And taking a few breaths. And then maybe gently gazing at the different faces of people who are here on this call with us. And just taking this as a moment, looking at the names and faces, to acknowledge that we're part of a whole network of humans with hopes and looking for ways to nourish us as we work towards our hopes. And I'm also going to take this as an opportunity to interview Chris a bit and to mine some of his insights and wisdom. And so what I'd like to do is just to start by asking him, Chris, what is Active Hope?
Really great question, and I'm enjoying just looking at the hopes expressed here. Barbara, in Poland, reconnection, and that word connection has come up quite a few times. So from Rafaela in Bristol, connection, inspiration, and what I want to really do is hold just for kind of pondering two different questions. And one question is, are you hopeful? And another question is, what do you hope for? So you've already expressed some of you what you're hoping for and connection. And we could ask the question, are you hopeful? Are you hopeful that you'll get inspiration? And you may be or you may not, but as soon as you start asking, are you hopeful, you get into a kind of like a judging and assessing. But when you ask, what do you hope for? What happens is you identify your motivation. You identify a direction that you want to move in. And what we're doing here is we're recognizing that the word hope can be used in different ways. And if we see hope, I was talking with a friend, Fernando, he was telling me recently, he's saying, hope is the feeling that things are going to get better. And he was saying, well, how can you have that when you start reading about climate change and reading about the prospect of collapse and all that's been happening with the pandemic? You know, that there can be a feeling of being on the either in or on the edge of a decline, and seeing our world in decline as well in so many ways. And in a way that hope can either seem missing or misleading. If we see it as that sense of weighing up an evaluation, are we hopeful? And what I'm also aware of is that when people don't feel hopeful, that can become a block to action. And when research has been done asking people about how they feel about the state of the world, how they feel about problems in the world, the commonest response, this was from a big survey carried out by the Mental Health Foundation in Britain some years ago, the commonest response was powerlessness. Powerlessness kind of linked also to kind of feelings of hopelessness, this feeling like, well, I don't think I can do anything. And part of my work really for over 3 decades now has really been around the psychology of what helps us face difficulty, what helps us face challenging situations and give our best response. And what I'm aware of is that the way we think about hope can make a difference. And so I'm going to move to a sharing of a slide. Ooh, here we go. Just really what I've been saying. These two different ways of thinking about hope. And so one is about, are you hopeful, is about probability. But what do you hope for is about desire. And I think of active hope as a 3-step process where you start from where you are, and that reality orientation is really important, because there may be some things you hope for that when you really look at things as they are now, you need to let go of them. And I know a lot of us have needed to relinquish hopes over the last year with the pandemic, things that we might have hoped to do, even something as simple as going down the pub or meeting up with friends or hugging someone close to us, that we've had to let go of a lot of those hopes. And so this starting where we are, I use this idea of the spider diagram. The spider diagram is where the spider is the body of the spider, that's here, is just representing us here now. It's like being facing the situation where you are. And then each leg of the spider is like a different way that it can go. And so the first step is to start from where you are. The second step is to identify what you hope for. Which leg of the spider do you prefer? And then the third step is to take steps to move that way. And this starting where you are, sometimes where you start from is on a downslope already. You're acknowledging that things have already taken a turning for the worse. And this can apply to individuals or can apply to communities or the world situation. I know there's a couple of people on the webinar who are part of a group working with me in Lebanon last year, where in the middle of our training, there was, we were meeting each week over from end of June and throughout July, and then in the beginning of August there was this massive explosion in Beirut, one of the largest explosions in history. So, and finding the group on this downslope here, and the training that we've been doing was really about recognizing that whatever you face, there's different ways it can go. And so our work together was saying, okay, starting from where we are, accepting this is where we are, what helps? What helps us find a better version of this? And this idea of active hope is not something you have, it's something you do. And really in our world there are so many ways that we can recognize that we are on a downslope, and particularly around climate change, but also we live in such a divided world, and there are those who seek to divide us even more, and make political capital out of that. And we will have our hopes from here. I hope it will be like this, I hope it will be like that. And if we're powerless, we can feel hopeless about our hopes, powerless about our hopes. And what I like about Active Hope is that you can apply this diagram to our own capacity to make a difference in the world. That there might be times where we face what's happening in the world and find ourselves just collapse in a heap, and feel like, kind of, and I do sometimes. But it's like, even from here, it's like saying, well, okay, from this starting point, what do I hope for? If I were to look at my ability to make a difference in the world, what do I hope for? And so active hope is not just a practice, it's a practice that we can get better at. It's a practice that we can become more skillful in. And I think of is it's similar in a way to gardening. You know, gardening is a practice, but it's also strengthened by skills and experience. And you can learn to become a better gardener. It's around what do you plant, what do you help grow. And in a way, Active Hope is about planting our hopes and helping them grow, cultivating our hopes and nourishing our hopes in a way that helps them grow, including our hopes about ourselves. And that's really why we set up this course. We can look at what's happening in the world, we can feel overwhelmed, find ourselves personally on a turning for the worse. And it's like saying, okay, from here, from this difficult starting point, how do we find the best version that can happen? And some questions that I find helpful here, they teach in a resilience program developed in the States at the University of Pennsylvania. They have this perspective check where they say, okay, what's the worst that can happen here? What's the best that can happen here? What's most likely to happen here? And I think of Active Hope as about being active to make the best or better options more likely, and the worst options either less likely or less awful. How's this sounding to you, Madeline, and to anyone else in the group? If there's anything that's not clear about Active Hope, do ask here.
It's sounding great, Chris, and you have actually already touched on something that I was wanting to ask you about, which is well, how do you see? So some people here might be already familiar with the body of work known as the work that reconnects, and I just wondering, how do you see the relationship between the work that reconnects and active hope?
Thank you. Really great question. And we're evolving this. And so I think there's a number of, just like hope can have different meanings and active hope can be seen different ways. Um, One way of thinking about active hope is this very precise three-step process of you start from where you are, you identify what you hope for, and then you take steps that way. That's my kind of working definition, and you can apply that on a personal level in your personal life. You can apply that working with families or teams or communities, and you can also apply that when looking at our world. And there's also a body of work that has under the heading of active hope, that is linked to one of my big influences really for decades now. I was lucky in the mid 1980s to discover the work of Joanna Macy when I was a young student. My partner in my 20s, Anne, she worked with Joanna Macy in one of her first workshops in Britain. And here's Joanna Macy, who's actually 92 now. And she was in her 50s when I first met her in the late 1980s. And her work was very much about how do we grow our capacity to make a difference in the world. And her first book was called Despair and Personal Power in the Nuclear Age. And it was really about getting people together to hear from each other how they feel about what's happening in the world, because often there can be a kind of taboo about talking about anything that's too depressing. And so what can happen, you can have a whole room full of people who are terrified about what's happening in the world, but they don't talk about it because they don't want to be seen as a downer. They don't want to be seen as the person pulling the conversation down. And if you start talking about some of the things that can be very disturbing, I don't know if any of others of you have this experience, but I certainly have, of kind of really being given messages that that kind of conversation is not welcome. And so what Joanna did, and this was really beginning in the late 1970s, was setting up groups for people to name how they felt about what was happening in the world, but then also work with each other, supporting with each other to find their empowered response. And that work has evolved and developed over the years and is called the work that reconnects. And when I went to interview Joanna, this was probably 2008. I just had a sense I needed to interview her, and I wanted to have a conversation with her where we shared with each other what we found had made a difference to our own experience of holding this question: what helps us face concerns about the world? What helps us kind of rise to the occasion, as opposed to crumple or turn the other way? And out of that conversation, we had such a good conversation that I suggested to Joanna, I said, how would it be to have a series of these conversations and put them together in a book? And the term Active Hope came out, it kind of grew out of as a title for this book. And so what we wanted to do in this book, we wanted to take the reader on a Work That Reconnects workshop. How would it be to access this material if you've never been on a workshop? And it was to guide people around this journey of these four parts of the what's been called the spiral of the work that reconnects. So sometimes when people talk about Active Hope, they're talking about the body of work that we include in this book. And so the book Active Hope, it's sometimes used to refer to the whole body of material, and sometimes used a bit interchangeably with the work that reconnects. But the way I see it is, I really like the idea that we can apply this diagram to ourselves. That sometimes when we face our concerns about the world, we may find ourselves just wanting to turn the other way, find ourselves having a dip in our ability. And say, if we apply Active Hope, we say, okay, starting from where I am right now, I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's all feeling too much, sometimes I feel like turning the other way. But what do I hope for? I really hope that I'll turn up and play my part. I really hope that I will not just play my part, but do that in as skillful and well-developed way as I can. And I think of people who are in their country's team for the Olympics. They take the process of training incredibly seriously. Their decisions about what to eat, when to go to bed, how much exercise to have, are guided by this question: what will help me grow my ability to show up in this major challenge, the Olympics? And I like the idea that we can choose to be on the team of life on Earth, facing a challenge much, much more important than the Olympics, which is us facing the challenges here on Earth right now. So many of them. And if we want to show up in this team, and in a way, what we're competing against is not each other, but we're competing against the kind of what we call the great unraveling, this kind of process of decline and falling apart in our world. And it's, in a way, there's a race of how can we have a turning? So if as a world we're on a downslope in all kinds of ways, how can we find the upslope? And I like this idea of crisis can be turning point. And crisis can be turning point, but also it really helps if we get training in how to more reliably turn, how to play our part in the great turning. And so I see the work that reconnects is a transformative journey. It was initially designed as an approach to group work, but we've been developing through Active Hope, the book, people have done it as a personal journey. And we've also been in developing this training, looking at how you can have this journey through a series of partnered conversations, just one-to-one conversations. How can we have a transformative journey? When I say a journey, there's a here and there's a there. How can we have a transformative journey that helps us grow our capacity to make a difference? So if we apply Active Hope to ourselves, and the hope is we can play a part in this story of the great turning, which is like a process of turning up in our world, what we want to turn towards a better future. And there's a lot that we might will want to turn away from. How do we take part in that story? And the work that reconnects is like a training journey, and it draws together a system of practices and insights that are gathered together in this process of going round this spiral of these four parts. And so what we've done is that we've taken this as the core structure of this. We're calling it a 7-week course, but it's more accurate to say it's a 7-part course. You can do it longer than a week each time, and certainly producing the course, I have to keep apologizing to people on the course because it takes such a long time to produce the videos that we're constantly behind schedule, but we will get there. We're on just finishing off week 5 videos at the moment, but there will be seven installments. And this idea of giving yourself time to watch the videos, it's a video based course, but also each week or each section of the course offers a practice for you to try out that is based on, I'd say the core source is the work that reconnects, but also I've worked for decades in the psychology of change and resilience. And so I draw on other sources too, particularly my work around resilience training and psychology of change. And particularly, I'm a great fan of narrative approaches and storyboarding. So I weave all of those in too. How's this sounding? Is this answering the question to Madeline? Also, for anyone listening, if there's something which isn't clear, do feel welcome just to write in the chat window. And Betsy, I see this is kind of training, examining disappointment. What is it? What did I expect? What did I fear? Really helpful, really helpful. There's so much disappointment. There's a term I find very helpful in acceptance and commitment therapy. There's a book called The Reality Slap. The reality slap, this idea that there's a reality gap where this is what I hope things will be, and then this is how things are, and it's so different. And that's like being on the lower leg of a spider. But then it's also acknowledging disappointments, but not letting that become a showstopper. Because I know it can do. I know some people, they look at what's happening in the world and feel so disappointed, so demoralized and disheartened that they think, what's the point? And this double spider diagram, there's kind of, even if we find ourselves on the worst leg of the spider, even from here, it can still go different ways. We don't know whether this is crisis that becomes a turning point that future generations will look back on and say, that was such an important period in our history, where although they were right on an edge, they really got the message and they rose to the occasion. We don't know what they'll say, but and a friend of mine, he says, well, I'm not hopeful that will happen. And I said, can it happen in you? Can it happen in you that you have a great turning up to play your part, turning away from the ways of being and living that are destroying our world and causing so much harm, and turning towards what you hope for? Madeline, over to you.
Well, I just wanted to come in at this point because I think one of the things that's really exciting for me in this training is that in my journey so far, with trying to nourish my own active hope, when I went to my first workshop that was a Work That Reconnects workshop, it was like, oh, wow, it was this huge moment of things can be different and really, really inspired by it. And then I bought the book and I read the book and I found that amazing. But at best, I could hope to get to maybe 4 workshops a year. And the way things are in the world now, it's like I need to be nourishing my active hope every day. I really need to be like having practices integrated in my daily life that help me, because it's like each day I wake up and I like maybe hear some news or I see something and I could start, going down again. And so the thing that I find really exciting in this training is that we're like exploring how we can take these practices and create short forms that we can actually build into our daily routines. And so that's one thing that really fires me up about it. And I don't know if for people who are here on our webinar in March, we kind of set a bit of a record for ourselves. We had a short form that consisted of 7 sentence starters, and we did it in 200 people in about half an hour. And this was like, oh, wow, we've just been around a spiral with 200 people in half an hour. And so we decided that this time we were going to challenge ourselves even more and make it even shorter. So we're proposing a short form practice that we could all do together now. And this is a practice called the 4 Declarations. And so it consists of 4 open sentences, one for each stage of the spiral at work that reconnects. And we're going to do them together using the chat. So what we'll do is I'll share my screen, and I'll put a sentence starter up on the screen, and then our task is just to say that sentence starter to ourselves out loud or quietly, and then just see what comes and type that into the chat. And I will read out everybody's answers. So we're creating one big answer together. And so in the work that reconnects, we begin with gratitude. Because gratitude is actually really countercultural and revolutionary. We're not encouraged to focus on all of the things that we do have. We're encouraged to focus on all that we lack, because that's what makes us good consumers. So we're going to create good, strong foundations for ourselves in this work by focusing a little bit on what it is that we actually appreciate in this world. Okay, so I'll give people a moment to just to read that sentence to themselves and let that sink in. And then I have to find if I can still get the chat up. Yes, I can. Great. So just letting that sentence starter sink in with you, and then feeling whatever would like to complete that sentence for you. And then when you've got it, typing that into the chat. And Chris is going to time us for just 1 minute. We're going to have just 1 minute in this short form here. 1 minute of intense gratitude. And we're going. Okay. So for supporting me to live, I give thanks to my father, to air, roots, kindness, food, friends, to the good people around me, to my family, to nature. I give thanks to the rain for my food to grow, all the elements, especially water, the rain and the peace of nighttime, Mother Earth, family and friends. For supporting me to live, I give thanks to my loved ones and all living beings, friends and the beauty of the natural world around me, my father, the earth, trees, my friends and family, music and creativity, my healthy body, trees, nature, soft, clean, fresh air, 2 local shops with organic, seasonal and local veggies, all the other than human beings, the earth. That's our time there. There's plenty more in the chat there if you'd like to read it to yourself. I'd invite us to take a moment to just feel any changes in our body from even just that tiny, tiny little bit of soaking in appreciation and acknowledging all that we have. And that's why it makes such a good foundation for our practice. And we've actually felt a huge amount of energy from the gratitude we've been receiving in feedback already so far from the people who've been taking part in the course. So Sonia wrote to us, "Thank you for this online course and this possibility to go deep into this work, connect and reflect. I already feel a lot more energized and inspired. I started reading Active Hope. This first week feels like it strengthened what I learned and makes me feel a lot more connected, resilient, and hopeful." Thank you, Sonia, for giving us permission to share your words. So we've got this gratitude that we're steeping in, and that starts to enable us to experience our interconnectedness. So in people's suggestions there was a lot of talk of family and of trees and oxygen, and it's like we're acknowledging that we're a part of all of this, and this is all a part of us. And with that acknowledgement, there can also come some more painful feelings. It's like we start to also acknowledge that a lot of the things that we love and appreciate are at risk. And this takes us on to the second stage of the spiral of the work that reconnects. And that's where we honor our feelings, we honor our pain for the world. And so I'm just going to share a screen with another sentence here, and I'd invite you to take a few breaths and to feel into what feels to speak out through you. So looking into the future we're heading into, concerns I have include. And again, we're only going to have 1 minute here. This is one of the strengths of having this spiral, is that we have a certain time, whether it's a minute or whether it's a week-long workshop, or however long you take for the installment on the course, we have a certain time and then we move on. And so it's a process, it's a moving process, and we don't get stuck. So I'd invite you to breathe into that sentence starter. So amongst us, some of the current concerns we have include the availability of resources, preserving the planet, lack of green space, lack of unity with each other, that nothing will ever change, that the best times are behind us. Concerns about what my children's lives may be, that the sea will die, inequalities, so many people so disconnected, the end of our species. Are we going to love each other? Societal and planetary collapse. Sea levels rising, food shortages, migrants with nowhere to go, hurting the most vulnerable. Thank you, Chris. So just inviting to take another breath in there, with hearing all of these concerns. Again, highlighting our deep interconnectedness with each other and with all the aspects of our world that we feel for. As part of the training, we have guided practices each week, and each practice, there's a way to practice it personally or in a pair or in a group. And I'm wondering, Kathy, whether I could possibly invite you in now to speak. Kathy is one of the people who's been participating in the training already, and had some really insightful things to say about the honoring our pain practice. I'm just wondering, Kathy, like, how have you found the experiences of the practices?
The honoring our pain practice was particularly special because in the past, when I didn't have the tools of this active hope process, and I tried to engage with people about my pains and my fears and my shame and my guilt around my love of the earth, I was shut down. People seem to be very intimidated and put off by speaking about these things. And when we were invited to do sentence starters around honoring our pain, I shared a couple of these sentence starters with a friend who I've known for a long time. And to sit with a big compassionate heart, holding the space for her to share her pain for the world. And then for her to sit with such deep love and hold mine, it was truly enormously invigorating to be able to speak out loud. I felt so held, and even though I'd been friends with her for a long time, I felt much closer to this person for having had this intimate, compassionate share together. And that was a massively special thing to realize, that actually when you can share your deep pain, it's not, things aren't going to get horrid and morose. They're actually going to get very tender and very, very dear. And we've been closer ever since. And our conversations have been more authentic. And so it was a huge privilege to have that real practical experience.
Thank you so much, Kathy. It's really amazing to hear like firsthand experience like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so this is how somehow these experiences of our interconnectedness and our fellowship with all beings begins to move us into the third stage of the spiral, which is seeing with new eyes, which is where we invite in a fresh perspective that will energize us, that will give us the inspiration and enable us to move forward to what we need to do. And this is a whirlwind trip round the spiral. This is us playing with how short form we can do it. But it's amazing how deeply I still feel it. Something that inspires me is. So this is a chance, maybe before we answer this, because seeing with new eyes is a good moment because it's about energizing, to maybe have a little shake, a stretch, a yawn, invite in that new energy, rub your hands together, whatever you need to do this to bring this in. And then let your imagination reach out into this world, into all the things that inspire you, and then splurge them here into the chat. Chris is going to be timing and I will be reading them out. So things that inspire us here today. Oh, they're coming thick and fast. The energy of young people, beauty that is still intact, all the birds and creatures and the growth of plants out there. Seeing my niece's enthusiasm for new experiences, life, true nature, the trees and the clouds, that all of you are here today and doing this work. All the people who are present now. This work. Seeing my goals manifest, feeling that sense of euphoria right before my goals manifest. Being present in each moment. Green shoots of hope and connection all over the world. New life and each dawn. My sister's love. People coming together to make something. People who give themselves beyond self-concern. When things grow again under the right conditions. Authenticity. Do I hear Chris playing the harmonica? Is that a minute up? It inspires me when I hear Chris playing the harmonica, but there's a lot more inspiration there in the chat, so do go ahead and fill yourself up by reading it there. And I believe we also have Bernie here, and Bernie is another one of the pioneers participating in the course as we've been producing it. And Bernie commented that he was particularly fond of the Seeing with New Eyes section. So I'm wondering if I could just invite your voice in to speak briefly about that, Bernie. Do feel free to unmute yourself and let us know where you're calling in from as well.
Yeah, I'm calling from the U.S. I'm in the state of Maine, way up north. And first, I'd just like to say I really am enjoying this course. I think it's extremely well done. I love the way it's presented as an ongoing practice, and it coincides so well with my Zen practice that it astounds me, really. But yeah, the Seeing with New Eyes, beginning with the interviews with Stephen Harding about Gaia and finding a Gaia place and having that reinforced by Madeline and Chris modeling it, that practice so well. I've always had a kind of special place practice, but in the context of the course, it really gave me a new perspective on it and a fresh way of approaching it. So one of my Gaia places up here in Maine is a kind of estuary beach area called Popham Beach. And in all the seasons except summer, you can go there and really not have a lot of interference from human sounds. And you can really focus on what's there. And, you know, there are seals, and you hear the mournful calls of the seals sunning themselves on the island. And, you know, just the shimmer on the water, the changes in the light, and the gulls and the terns and everything. And you can really open up your senses, as you showed in that presentation, and really listen deeply and be receptive, deeply receptive. And you begin to feel a connection if you do that very often. And a strange thing can happen. There's a kind of stillness that emerges, a kind of stillness and sense of calm. And somewhere in that stillness and sense of calm and feeling connected to that place, I disappear. I sort of just disappear into that larger, you could call it the larger web of life. You could call it Gaia. You could call it Buddha mind. But it does happen. It's a wonderful feeling to let loose, to let go of that conditioned I, and to feel like you belong in something larger. And I think if you do that, I think it's an essential practice, and that if you can do it, it can't help but change you. And I'd like to thank both Madeline and Chris, because they presented that so well that it gave me a new perspective on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you. You put that beautifully. And I think it really it illuminates how this stage, the seeing with new eyes, it changes us. It enables us. There's so many different ways to see with new eyes, but the core point of this stage is that shift. And that's what then moves us through to the fourth and final stage of the spiral, which is called going forth. And this is where we really connect with what part we'd like to play and how we can nourish and support ourselves to do that. So here comes the last sentence starter in our super swift trip around the spiral. Let's see if we can see this. Oh, slightly up. There, can we see that? Something I'd love to do to make a difference is. So this is an invitation to dare to hope in this moment, to connect in with what it is that you deeply hope for and a part you would like to play in that. And Chris is going to be timing, and I will be reading from the chat. So feel free to share them. Something I'd like to do to make a difference is to find more Gaia places, to hold Active Hope retreats in Cape Town, network with like-minded people and be active with them. Active Hope courses online. I'm going to put mine in there. I would like to reach out with Active Hope to school children, to prioritize kindness above all else, to inspire others to Active Hope, to help other people to do this work and find hope and be unstuck. Take the Active Hope practice to more people, to find a way to help other people see that we can all make a little difference and that this is worth doing. Make us aware that we are part of nature, not separate. Spread resiliency in the community. Help people understand that we are all part of the world, that the environment isn't just something over there, but their world. Inspire Active Hope for others, especially my grandchildren. Help in organizing the grassroots movement to bring about the change. To let myself rest and know I am doing enough. Engage with people in my locality to learn from this work. Be more consciously aware daily. slow down and listen more, trust, and open myself to deeper connection with others. And that's our minute up. I'd really like to honor all of those hopes. It's so beautiful to read them. And it's like once we've identified those hopes, the really important question is, how can we best support ourselves and nourish ourselves towards those hopes? And I suppose that's where we're like creating this training, really working towards it. Hope, our hope is that it will be one part of that. And I think we have Rafaela. Rafaela, are you also here? You are here. Great. Rafaela is another person who's been participating in the course. And I'd just really love, I see you're in Bristol, and I'd love to hear from you. What have you found useful in the course?
Thank you. I have young children, so it's worked really well for me that I don't have to commit to a specific time or a regular time. I can work through the course as I can. I've really enjoyed the sense of community as I see other people's comments and I read them, and sometimes, Madeline, you've responded to mine or to others, and I feel, as well as watching the videos, there's also this sense of real-time involvement and a community that's there too. It feels like such a huge gift. Yeah, and I just find it also really, really inspiring. And like you, Madeline, I found it quite powerful in the midst of my daily life to be trying out these practices. It feels really beautiful to see the different people's voices that you've included as well. There's something really rich in that, the different people that you've drawn together to illustrate the different points that you make. Yeah, I could say more, but I'm just really, really grateful. And the fact that it's a free gift, that then naturally I feel inspired to contribute something back, to give something of myself. I like that energy too.
Thank you so much, Rafaela, because you've magically covered all of the points that we actually had wanted to cover, but we hadn't quite got time for. So thank you very much. It's wonderful. And so I'm wondering how people feel having had that whirlwind trip round a spiral, and feel free to put any thoughts, comments, experiences into the chat. But I'd really like to hand over to Chris, we've not got that much time left. I'm just wondering, Chris, is there anything more that you would like to say?
One of the questions you had, Madeline, when we were talking about this are what are foundations? We call it the Active Hope Foundations Training. And I really like that idea of, well, foundations is the sense of what's underneath us, what do we rest on, what supports us. And it's for each of us to kind of, I suppose, hold that question, what holds me up, what supports me. And we want the course to be there to support people in finding and offering, we call it your gift of active hope. I'm just going to share screen. When you really hope for something, and you hope for it so much, then a lovely question is, well, what do you want to give your hope? If you could give something to your hope, what would that be? And I think of our gift of active hope is our offering to the process of supporting our hopes. If there's a story of, the story of making our hopes more lightly, what's our part in that story? So our gift of active hope is like, it's us showing up. And there's something here about And it ties in with what you were talking about generosity, really, because I love this idea of like a relay race in time where we give and we can pay back, but we can also pay forward. And in a way, it's what happens through generations, that we receive from those generations that have come before us, ancestors. And in a way, if we can pass on benefit to those who come after us, that's how the kind of the sequence of life carries on. And so we really wanted to have that right in the heart of the way we organise the course, that we're very grateful to a grant from the Emergence Foundation that helped us even consider making this available free of charge. And it doesn't cover all our costs, but it kind of got us over the starting point. And this idea of putting it out there, but also this idea of, I suppose, if we come from gratitude and acknowledging, I mean, the gift of life, like this amazing gift of life, that if we can really appreciate it and feel our love for it and our deep desire that life continues and life flourishes, then kind of from our gratitude, we want to give something on. And so I guess this course is, gratitude is a foundation, but we're also looking at what else is there as foundations, and particularly this idea of practices are foundations, that we can do practices on a regular basis. I love the idea of Tai Chi as a movement practice to support well-being. We can think of Active Hope as a movement practice for collective well-being. We do a bit of Active Hope each day around offering our gift, playing our part. So anyway, those were some thoughts I was left with. But back to you, Madeline.
And I'd just like to really emphasize how great it feels, the feeling of being part of like almost a tribe or a network of Active Hope adventurers. And I love this term adventurer, because it is. It's like we're exploring, we're engaging with life as an adventure, and we're exploring how these practices can support us in engaging with it like that. So I'd really like to take this opportunity to send love out to all the Active Hope adventurers out there. And I'd also invite everybody to once again just really feel yourself where you are, feeling the weight of gravity pulling you down onto your seat, maybe your feet touching the floor. And then in your mind's eye, just imagining out to all the other humans at this time who are holding hopes and who are needing ways to nourish those hopes, and knowing that we're all in this together. We're all a part of this great turning. And then bringing your eyes gently back to this screen and looking at some of the adventurers here. And we're running out of time now. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And I would invite everybody to unmute yourselves and just say goodbye in whatever language, whatever way you would like. And we can have a cacophony of goodbyes. It's been really wonderful to share this moment with you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Started.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a great day.
Adiós. Hasta luego.